Tell me about it, eh?
What's that?
What happened? I want to know everything you saw and heard. Everything.
Monica, come on now, come on.
Let go of me! I'm Alberto Ranieri. She's my wife.
Excuse me.
Monica, speak to me. What happened?
Please, you're tiring her.
Monica, dear, who did it? Who?
I've run through it over and over again. I can't get it out of my head, but I can't manage to pin it down either.
Let me finish. He isn't even Italian, and you're making him risk his life. Somebody's already tried to kill him once. And what makes you so sure they won't try again? You're blackmailing him. Look out behind! Ah!
I can't hold it! Oh!
Hi, welcome.
Yeah, hi.
Yeah, this is I.D.K. I'm here with Vic, and today
Yo.
we start the first part in our multi-part retrospective of going over the films of Italian filmmaker Dario Argento. Vic, introduce yourself and your stuff to everyone here.
Hello, my name is Vic. Usually we do videos on anime at Laughing Jackal Media, but we are currently on hiatus at the moment. So luckily,
Lucky for me.
I am able to do my other stuff that I love, which is of course movies, and in this case, I am a pretty gigantic fan of Dario Argento.
All right. That is great. Now, who is Dario Argento?
He is a director from Italy. He started working as a lot of directors do, working on screenplays. He was a screenwriter. One of his biggest that he would work on would be the spaghetti western classic from Sergio Leone, the same guy that did, Good and the Bad and the Ugly, Once Upon a Time in the West. But what he's mainly known for by the 70s and 80s, he's mainly known for giallo and horror movies. Now, the next question is, what is giallo? Well, in Italy, giallo means yellow. And in Italy, there was a big like pop culture deal where there was a lot of murder mystery novels, and those novels would have book covers that were yellow in nature, so the idea is that yeah, giallo would refer back to those murder mystery novels, and thus that is where the term giallo comes from. And then there's gialli, that would be plural.
Huh. Well, yes, we're both big into giallo and all this Italian junk. Dario Argento, before he became a filmmaker, before he directed films, he would work as a writer on a lot of films. He started his career in the mid mid 60s, 1966, and it wouldn't be until 1969 that he would get to make his first film that would be released in the February 1970, Bird with the Crystal Plummet. Oh my god. The bird with the crystal, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's gonna be a main thing going forward. Is that any like these Italian movies have long ass titles?
Yeah, I'm just not good at pronouncing plumage, plumage,
Plumage. I say
plumage.
it like plumage.
Yeah, it's a fancy. But yeah, Dario Argento was the was a writer for a lot of films, well over 10. Some of them cowboy, most of them genre stuff, so western, uh, yeah, mostly genre stuff. Some comedic films. He wrote a couple comedic films, whether it be
Yeah, that was kind of like what a lot, like I said earlier, that's what a lot of like Italian directors who were like screenwriters before were mainly working on by the 60s.
yeah, yeah. I think it's important to point out that he was that a lot of the scripts he worked on, they were like comedy dramas, or there was a lot of comedy, and we'll kind of see that, because he wrote and directed this film, so you do kind of see, at least in like the first three of his films, there's definitely like comedic bits. I mean, all of his films always have these little bits that are kind of offbeat and like silly and weird, but like his first couple films have like a lot of like explicit comedy scenes. Like this whole scene here is supposed to be a funny scene,
Yeah,
and
it's
that's
very much inspired by, like obviously Hitchcock
oh yeah,
was
this
like a
one,
gigantic.
big Hitchcock influence in this one.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I mean, let's yeah, Dario Argento, he wrote uh a bunch of films beforehand, and then he finally got to write and direct this film, which is loosely based off a novel called Screaming Mimi, which they actually made an American film in the 1950s based off that book. Apparently, it was not very good, but I mean, who knows? It could have just been the style of the time. Um, but man, I love the way this film opens, because you really get a good, like, here it is, here's his style, where it opens is this bird's eye view above a desk, a typewriter. You hear the typing out. It's all
Oh
lit
yeah, then
very
you're
neatly.
seeing like the black glove, which
Oh
is a
yeah,
thing that is very big with Giallo. And to
yeah.
make a point that is
So
really
like
important, this was
just
not the first like Giallo film.
yeah,
That
yeah, that
ob-
goes back to the early '60s at least.
like with Mario Bava.
Yeah,
So, and that's a whole guy we could talk about like as its own series
we
entirely.
might.
But
I
yeah,
think he'll end up coming
yeah,
up,
but back to
but
yeah, back to Bird. You
yeah,
see like the typewriter, you're seeing like I think if I remember correctly, there's like the cigarette smoke.
not in
Like
that one. You're thinking of a different scene.
oh okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, like you're seeing the typewriter, and then it's like setting up the first murder. It's
Yes.
so like it's so like it has like a fiery like very tense feel to it.
Yes. I would say very fast, like very quickly. You're getting the title credits, and you're right into it. There's a killer man. Here's this lady he's stalking, planning to murder. And something we should point out: the black gloves. Because not everyone is familiar with a genre of an Italian film that was popular through the '60s and '70s. But like, to explain, like, the black glove killer is kind of like the default killer in Italian horror. Like, that's the kind of the default look, the black glove killer. The American equivalent would probably be something like the psycho redneck, a guy with like a hockey mask or like a bag over his head.
Yeah, although American films would definitely adapt the like black glove gimmick into like some
Something like
slashers would
Scream.
have.
There's a bit of that in Scream. Oh, okay. I thought you were gonna say something. Uh,
Oh no, I was just waiting for you.
yeah, but I mean to explain to the American, black glove killer is kind of like their staple type of killer. Think of it as like their version of, kind of the atypical serial killer in an American slasher film, like a Jason, like a rednecky guy in the woods that butchers people. But yeah, I mean, I love this opening. Um, I love how well lit it is. I love yeah, I mean the black gloves. But when he's taking the pictures, and
Oh yeah.
also yeah, where it's like it's POV of the camera, and then like takes the picture, pauses the frame, then keeps going, and I mean the music. What did you think of like where it's kind of like
Well, it's
happy but
Ennio
also creepy?
Morricone who did the
Yeah.
score,
All right.
so everything that guy's done, even I think I've even seen movies that I don't care for, but I will still always go like, "Oh, that score's good," and you want to know why? Because it's Ennio
Yeah.
Morricone.
Who
He knows
is
what he's doing.
who is Ennio Morricone?
He's Italian composer. He worked on a stupid amount of movies.
Yeah.
Kind of like basically in the 20th century, like the second half,
Yeah.
you will find a movie that he worked on.
Yeah. Now he worked his biggest work wasn't it the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly films?
Oh yeah, everyone knows that. The
Man,
womp womp womp.
yeah,
Yep, that's him.
he's the guy that did the wah wah wah. Now, of course, you'll actually hear he also does a wah 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 in Mario Brava's Danger Diabolic.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of because he also did the soundtrack for that, which is pretty good.
Yeah, yeah. I remember looking
There's a
that up
lot
when he
of
did
stuff
that.
that
Yeah.
sounds kind of like Good and the Bad and the Ugly, but he does the sound here, which of course Dario Argento, as we'll get into, is known for doing a lot of the music in his films done by the rock band Goblin, and there was even one film where he got didn't he get Motorhead to do like music for it?
Yeah, well, he more or less with that movie, because I know which one you're talking about. He more like just got like a song to be put onto the soundtrack.
Yeah.
Motorhead didn't make like a exclusive song for it.
Yeah, but they play it a lot, like it's clearly supposed to be. But he works a lot with more rock kind of style.
Yeah, but you think wouldn't be like a success, especially given like what's like
There's a lot of
what
times you see it and it sucks.
yeah, but here it like whether it's this movie or especially some of his later films, it fits so well that you can't imagine the movie without that soundtrack.
Yeah, because it's so well it's so well, I would say, integrated, where it's like you could not imagine, like it's intentionally supposed to be like non-traditional sounding score to like create a certain feeling, where a lot of times, when rock music for the score in a lot of other movies just kind of sound bad, where it's like, oh man, how do we pump this up? I know, let's put a guitar, like I think of those Resident Evil films. I think the first two did that.
Or like anything that like
Or Ghost
Weinstein
of
was involved
Mars.
in the 90s, although in that case that's because it had that stupid like, that butt rock 90s like,
Hell yeah.
what was it?
I
Yeah,
fucking
new
love
metal
butt rap.
whatever.
Come on, you don't like Fred Durst, director of The Fanatic?
Keep rolling, 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 rolling.
My way or the highway. Come on, man. You don't love that?
I mean, I might as well get a lobotomy.
Ah, come on, man. He was in the WWE games for a while. Come on, man.
I mean, yeah, it still makes me want to have a lobotomy.
This podcast fully endorses Fred Durst. We consider him cinema.
It doesn't.
Oh, come on. Cinema. Every time I see The Fanatic, this is what I think. Right? I think cinema. That's from Citizen Kane. It's a pretty important part of that movie.
Yeah, that movie is indeed cinema.
It really is. But this movie's also cinema. I really like the next shot where you see his knife collection. What?
Oh
Because
yeah, he would use that type of shot a lot, and again, it's the way that he Argento is able to make this situation, which is very tense, also feel very unreal and hyper stylized.
yeah, surreal,
So
kind of beautiful. Like I really like how you know the because it's mostly black except for just this little bit of like red velvet kind of and it there's a big contrast between the knives, which the knives themselves, the way they're kind of lit, the blades kind of look black, so it's these black blades on this red background. It's striking color. Black and red are the most like striking colors together, and it just looks so pretty. It looks pretty
yeah,
and
and
it's
that's
like
the thing
deadly.
that is going to be mentioned a lot with his filmography is that his films are going to deal with very macabre subjects, murder, stuff like that, but it's going to be betrayed. And this is the thing that a lot of Italian directors would do. Not like how Argento would do it, but what a lot of they would how it would be executed was that you will have these very disturbing scenes or disturbing visuals, but they're so beautiful that it just creates this very bizarre like visual and then kind of emotional response to it. Like it's
Yeah.
really really cool.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting. We know that but yeah, so this is where we get introduced to the main character of this movie, who's played by this guy called Tony Muslane, I think. Muslane.
Tony Musante, I guess. I
No, no,
cannot pronounce it for the life of
that
me.
is no, it's like Muslane. It's a kind of because he's an Italian American, so it's a name that sounds kind of Italian, last name kind of Italian, but not too Italian, because of course, a common trope with these films is that they will always usually star American actors, and it's
That
because
was like Italian cinema in general, where they would get actors from many different parts of the world because very famously or infamously they would not record Italian films would not record dialogue during scenes. So what they would do is that they would have it dubbed over. So you can have an English language soundtrack, an Italian language soundtrack. I think with these movies, we're mainly watching it with the English language soundtrack.
yes.
A- And it's not like with other movies where, or other countries where, oh, one is clearly superior to another because you have the original language. Because here it's kind of like every with Italian cinema, especially in the case of genre cinema, pretty much every language is pretty much valid.
Yeah, well, it's also, of course, one of the reasons they would do that is because their cameras were really loud, so it was hard. It was nearly impossible to actually pick up sound because any sound would just get like you couldn't record on this on the set or anything. It'd all get drowned out by the hum of the cameras. So
Oh,
everything,
yeah, I don't think I knew about that.
yeah,
But that is
but
actually kind of funny for some
that's
reason.
the entire reason Italian films are the way they are, where it's you can have a scene and one guy speaks Italian, one guy speaks German, one guy speaks French, and it works because they don't have to actually understand each other. It's all going to get dubbed anyway. And that's one of another reason they got films done very fast, because they didn't have to worry about being quiet because they weren't recording sound, so they didn't have to worry about that. So they would have just crewmen working on sets and doing whatever while they film one scene because they don't have to worry about being quiet. They don't have to worry about making noise. But that's kind of the main reason is just because they did not record sound on set. All of it would be dubbed in later, the sound effects, the voices, everything. But I point out how in a lot of these films, a lot of these giallo films, Italian films, the main character is usually American. And it's
Yeah,
it's it's to
or
get
American or British.
yeah. Well, British, but like they don't want you to know they want you to think it's an American guy so that Americans will watch it. They think that'll increase its chances of getting picked up in America and getting seen by Americans. So that's why they do it. That's why they'll get an American actor that's like my minor famous from like TV roles. They'll send him over to Italy. This is kind of interesting because Tony is Italian American, so it's like, oh, he kind of looks Italian, but also he is American. And maybe an American will see this and be like, oh, all these other people are also Italian Americans, like they'll be like, oh, okay, no, this isn't a foreign film. This is just a film made by Italian Americans that takes place in Italy. And,
Yeah,
Tony,
but when watching the movie, you can also very much tell that it is not, from anywhere in America. Like the way that, especially like how like the streets are
yeah,
shot and laid out, you can kind of tell that it's not from America. But because
oh,
that there is, English dialogue, that's not going to be too much of an issue.
yeah, anyway, this Tony guy, minor TV actor, best known for being in the first season of Oz. He was like one of the
Yeah, I
main.
looked that up as well. I know Oz. I have yet to watch Oz.
Gotcha. But yeah, for the longest time, I of course thought it had something to do with the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, kind of intentional, like probably.
Yeah. So anyway, he's a writer that has been in Italy for a while due to writer's block, trying to figure stuff out. And he recently finished a book on birds so that he can have enough money to get back home. And something I like
And I
is
wonder if this plays into the movie later.
it might, who knows. But what I like about this scene is, it's an exposition scene and it exists solely for what I was talking about earlier to explain why is there an American guy in Italy. Here's that explanation because they want an American actor to reach into the American audience. But all of this stuff, they're like walking and talking and they're going through like all this building with all these like glass displays of like the birds and stuff. And you kind of go by the stuff like really fast. They film it from like the other side of the glass. And it's a good way to make these kind of like exposition scenes, which are the worst type of scenes in a movie, is where people are just talking but they're like just explaining kind of like plot kind of stuff, where it's just like here's what's happening. So I like that a lot of these scenes there's something visually interesting going on. We'll see that like there's some cuz this whole movie is a lot more Hitchcockian. It's a lot more almost like procedural, police procedural than his
Yeah,
later.
like a lot of people when we talk about Argento, we kind of put him in like the horror category, and that is very true. When we get into like kind of like the mid to late 70s, and especially into the 80s. But here with Bird of the Crystal Plumage, even though it's got like visual trademarks that we assign with horror, especially really the idea of a serial killer killing women. That's very much horror line. When it comes to how the story is actually presented and how the mood is presented, it's very much more like just it's more of a of a crime thriller than a or a mystery thriller than a like out and out horror movie.
Yeah, that would make sense because I would definitely say his next film is definitely a lot. His next two films are definitely a lot closer to crime thriller or just thriller in general, not outright. Here's a guy murdering people with a knife, like a Friday the 13th or something like that. But I do appreciate that a lot of these like talking and just saying information stuff. There's a lot of it's a lot of it is visually interesting. They
It
do
is,
little
which
they
is why I
do
think it's very key with these types of scenes. Because with Burr with the Crystal Plumage, there are definitely parts, and we're going to get into those that can definitely come across as rather clunky or rather yeah no clunky is the best way to describe it, but because of how it looks and how it's framed, it really doesn't become that much of an issue, just more of an observation.
yes. Well, okay. So we get into like a scene I really like where the guy is walking down the street. He looks
Yep.
across the street and he sees this art exhibit, and there's two people struggling. There's some kind of struggle.
Oh, I love that scene so much because you see the woman on the floor, like you see the struggle happen. Then you see as the guy in the mask, or you think it's the guy in the mask running away, and you see her on the ground in like in her blood, and you see the main character behind the like glass, like is it a door or a mirror? I don't remember what it
Well,
was. It was like a
yeah,
mirror.
it's like it's like a sliding glass door. There's like a glass door you go through. Then there's just this little kind of like when you go to like the mall or a department store, how they're, or the supermarket, you go through one automatic door and then you go through another automatic door in that little between area. He's stuck. He's entrapped between that little between area, which I really like. I think it's sort of like I think it's like a kind of visual metaphor kind of stuff where, you know,
Yeah, and it just looks cool because it ramps up the tension because he's trying to help her and he can't, and then it just keeps, like, building and building and building until it's a resolution.
yeah, I mean, that whole place, it's an art exhibit, and pretty much everything is white. The lady is wearing white, which makes, the guy dressed in black stick out more. And all the exhibits are creepy looking. They look like something n- that would fit within like a dreamscape of Elm Street or creepy art in Clive Barker's house. But
Oh, yeah, absolutely, and that's kind of the thing that is very, important, and it's an idea that Argento's gonna go back to over and over, is where art is going to have this like negative outcome, or in the case by near the film's end, almost like have a physical like relationship with with the cast, where it's not just there for like the visual, but there's also a thematic and emotional like weight behind it.
yeah. Well, I really like when he's trapped, cuz he goes in and he's trapped. He can't leave, which I interpret as this kind of visual thing where he's already past the point of no return where he can't, leave and just keep walking down the street and go about his day. He's now being thrusted into this creepy murder mystery kind of stuff. But of course, he hasn't fully got there yet. He's, as like the woman is like kind of crawling and bleeding out, he can't fully end, because you can't have a murder until someone dies. So it's only until she kind of like passes out from loss of blood that he's able to actually enter. Now that like the crime has been fully committed, that's when he can transition into this thing. And I really like the wide shot there of where you see like the whole glassed area, and you see him kind of just walk over to the corner and lay down, and you see like the cops coming, and I like how it's shot. I like the sound where
Oh,
it's when you see it from the outside or you see it from inside the studio where you hear like his voice kind of more muffled. And I like the little pan they do to the deaf guy um, outside that he's pointing at. Um, yeah, um, and I think that looks really great. And I want to talk. Speaking of how good the movie looks, the guy who was the cinematographer for this film.
yeah, Vittorio's Storaro.
Yes, who is of course best known for working on Apocalypse Now. He did a lot of films with Warren Beatty. One I want to point out is Dick Tracy, because Dick Tracy also has a Black Glove Killer. It has a little bit of giallo touches to it, and he also works with Woody Allen. He's worked on his last 3 films. He also did Last Tango in Paris. Like this guy has worked on a lot of big films with a lot of big directors like Bernardo Bustielli.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Bernardo
Yeah, the
Bertolucci, I
last
believe that's how it's
emperor.
pronounced.
Yeah. So very talented on his first film. He has a lot of very talented people. His editor was uh, uh, Franco Fracielli. And
Yeah,
I
it's
mention him because he would do all of Argento's films throughout his golden era, which people can refer to his golden era as this film and then opera. So all through the 70s and 80s, this was the guy's editor. He was kind of like also he worked with Lino Wertmuller, who did art house films, was the first woman nominated for best director.
that's
So
pretty cool.
I mean, a lot of the people that he's working. I mean, Macconi. He's working with some of the most talented people in Italy on this film, and that is so lucky. Your first film, which I mean, Argento did writing for a fair amount of films that did the score for, so it's not that surprising. But to get basically like the best guy for sound, the best guy, one of the best guys for editing, one of the best guys for cinematography that you can get within the country of Italy is pretty impressive. It's pretty lucky, uh, for sure.
Oh, so after that, I believe the scene goes where he's being interrogated by the police. And as another thing that is going to be seen with these movies is that the police are basically worthless.
Well, it depends, like I would say in American horror films, they're very useless. Like how many times in an American horror film does the cop end up getting killed because he decides to just sit and sleep in his car? Like, because it's like
Yeah,
it's a guy with a knife. At least in Giallo movies, sometimes they use guns. Sometimes the bad guy does just use a gun. So it's like, all right, if you get shot by a gun, fine. I mean, what are you going to do? But it's like, you're a police officer, you have a gun, and there's a guy with a knife down the street slowly walking towards. It would be very easy to not get killed. Like, realistically, it would be very easy to not get killed by a slasher movie guy. Where
yeah,
I feel like this is a little bit like I always remember Behind the Mask, where the guy, the serial killer guy they're interviewing says the only way it's real simple to escape a slasher movie villain, just be out in the open so we can't sneak up on you and just run in a straight line. That's all you have to do to avoid getting killed. It's the easiest thing ever. Um, yeah, so I would say these Italian cops are more competent than the American counterpart, but that's a pretty low bar.
Yeah, and there is a like actual reason behind that. It's not just because it's like story convenience. It's more or less that there was like distrust of the cops because of like still kind of the after effects of like fascist Italy.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, but yeah, at least at least it has kind of a point. Like when the cops they take his passport and they're like, "We're not going to let you leave the country until you help us with any information you have." Where it is like, yeah, like there's some issues with the police, because this film was filmed 1969. I mean, it was like what 20 years ago they were like a fascist country. I mean, it is pretty.
Yeah.
Like they were doing World War II and stuff. It was like pretty crazy. They were trying to remake the Roman Empire. I mean, it's like pretty crazy things. But so the guy, after you get that, the guy's he's walking in the fog. He's being followed by
Oh,
some
I love
figure.
that. And where the guy is coming at him with an axe.
I think it's supposed to be a meat cleaver.
Oh, it's still like he's like trying to swing at him with this like, like
Yeah, he ends up.
it's like a almost I just remember it looking like a machete for some reason.
To me, it looked more like some kind of club or something. But it ends up breaking a pipe. And what I really like is it's fog, and so he's walking, and then you see a little bit of a figure. It's this old lady who then immediately goes, "Watch out!" And there's like some kind of like fast edit of like the guy swinging, and I like it because the killer and that old lady are basically dressing the same way. They're both wearing black. They both have black gloves. So when the old lady puts like her hand on him on his shoulder, for a second you think, "Oh, is that the killer?"
Yeah,
It gets a
it's
good
kind
little
of
jump.
like, a fake out and kind of like a way of like dis like, what's the word I'm looking for? You're not making the viewer sure of themselves as
Yeah,
you're watching,
that's a
making it
thing he does.
discombobulated.
Yeah, that's
That's
something
what I'm
you
looking
get a
for.
lot in Argento stuff. You'll get more of it, and it'll get to probably the peak of that would be Suspiria.
Oh,
Everything's kind of.
that's it. Yeah. Oh, I'll love when we get to that movie. Oh God, yeah.
Yeah. So, the guy he gets home and he's having these kind of like visions, and there's like this music, but also there's that tick of the clock and all that. I really kind of like that part. I was like, wow, there's a lot going on in that one kind of scene. Do you have any thoughts on it?
Yeah, it's again like because it's playing with the ideas of time, and then it's using the environment as kind of like a tool against the main character and
Yeah.
against the audience because he is the fish out of water, so
It's
to
also
speak.
kind of playing with sound because the music kind of mixes a little bit with that tick of the clock. The music, of course, the tick of the clock is diegetic, which means it's like
Yeah, it
a
means that it's
sound
actually
that
in the
characters
scene.
that characters in the scene can hear, where the music is non-diegetic, but they're kind of going together. And that's something Argento plays with. Of course, he plays with a lot of perspective stuff. You see the start of it here, where it's like, oh, is this a sound they can hear? Is this a sound they can't hear? He's playing with, and once again, it gets real big in Suspiria. There's a lot of that in Suspiria. Okay, so anyway, we get the bring in the perverts scene where they bring in a
Oh my god, I love that scene. That's where that comedy
yeah.
comes in, where they are lining up all these guys, and I think didn't if I remember correctly, or if I'm thinking about a different movie, didn't they bring in like the old lady as well?
No, they
Oh,
bring
okay.
in a list of these perverts because it's like, hey, maybe it's perverts because in reality, most of the time, like when you're hunting a killer, it is just some random guy who did it for almost no reason, or the husband.
Yeah.
Like there's,
Other
you
than
know,
to get like just like sexual gratification out of it.
yeah, and we got to say, the punchline, the crescendo of this joke scene is when they bring out a trans person, and they're like, this is for perverts, not trans people. So this says, there's nothing wrong with being trans. So that means this movie's forward thinking and progressive.
Very forward thinking.
Yeah, I mean, there we go. Trans people, they aren't perverts. I'm awesome. So then we go from that comedy scene to another comedy scene where they use the crime computer, and
Yeah.
the guy who's explaining all these computer stuff. He's wearing dark sunglasses, and he has he looks like, picture in your head like a cartoony scientist man, and that's kind of what he looks like. He's got the sort of Einstein type hair.
I remember that. Then they have like, it looks like it's like this weird thing where it's like trying to be like futuristic in a bizarre way.
Yeah,
Or
like,
to make it kind of easy for like all the information to be synthesized into this computer.
yeah, like it's sort of, it's kind of a silly scene too, but it's also a little bit sci-fi, like it's a computer that you input data in, and it gives you like possible suspects and stuff like that. Not like predictive crime, it's just going off a database, and it does seem like something that's way too high tech for like 1970s Italy. Like it is a little sci-fi, which I just kind of bring up because in Tenebrae, we talk about that, how that movie, a lot of people don't even know that it's actually set in the future.
Yeah.
It's set in the future because there's just like one scene in that movie where John Saxon has a video monitor or something. Like he has a live feed of a security cam monitor. It's just like such
Yeah.
a I mean, it's crazy that for no reason that film is set in the future. But a slight
Oh, I agree.
like a slight future where by the time it happens, you don't even really question. You're like, oh, okay, yeah. I mean, that's just like oh yeah, he can live feed of his 1982 security camera. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it's the movie. But yeah, yeah. But one thing I want to point out is in that police station, all the walls are like white.
Yeah, like the museum, there everything's like white, everything's very like sterile, and like it kind of also again helps with the idea of, like in this case with like art influencing it, it kind of adds this sort of idea, I think, where because everything is like sterile looking, or at least these these like important areas are sterile looking, it causes there to be like almost like I think a Rorschach test in a way.
Yeah. Well, I think what I like about all the walls being white is it means that like everything else sticks out. I've like example, something as simple as a guy holding a red pen, like holding that up against a white background, it makes it kind of stick out more. And I think it helps makes these kind of like police procedural type scenes where they go over data. It makes it a lot more interesting because it's against a white background, so all these like little bits of red or just brighter colors, they really pop more. It makes the image a little bit more visually interesting to make up for the fact that it's just people kind of going over information we kind of already know.
Yeah, again, it's where because of Argento's skill as like a visual person, it makes scenes that for other in other cases would be rather dull to watch more engaging, because there's something again like intriguing in either a like a traditional like aesthetic point of view, or you're attracted because of how like off kilter it is.
Yeah, there's a certain kind of like vibe and feel to it in his movies. Like things look very pretty, but also sometimes things are just kind of weird and off kilter. I remember the in Phenomenon, there's just that one Asian girl at the school who has just a picture of like Ario Speedwagon or something, like a T-shirt that just says "I love like some band." It's like it's an obvious like fake T-shirt. It's not official merch, and it just looks funny.
Oh yeah, again, it's everything that makes the world of his films, and even again, even in the beginning, more interesting and in a way I would say colorful, because then it makes the rather like standard on paper sounding story
Yeah,
more engaging.
that is, because I mean, so many of his films are basically just there's a guy killing people, but
Yeah.
it's how it's shot and it's how he handles, because a lot of horror films struggle with what do we do when there's no monster, and a lot of times they'll just pad it and fill it with nothing. Like the other day, I watched Night Swim, and
I've heard of oh you poor son of a bitch.
yeah, well, one of the ways they pad that out is okay. So the plot, right, is that the pool is haunted with a monster or something. So, obviously, oh, they're going to move in, this family's going to move into that house. Well, before they do that, they go see another house and they go, I don't really like this house. Can you show us another one that's cheaper? And then they go to the haunted house. And it's like, why don't they just go to the haunted house to begin with?
Yeah, you would again. I've not seen the movie yet. I
Yeah.
just know that it's
Yeah.
not.
Well,
Uh,
it's it's a weird bit of padding, It's like, oh, is the story going to start? Nope. Now it's going to start. It's like you got to find a way to make the time in between the monster and the killings and all the creepy shit. You have to find a way to make it interesting, whether that be from how you shoot things or just, I don't know, maybe the story's actually really engaging and the acting's really good. Or, you kind of make it interesting, memorable, like the Friday the 13th with Crispin Glover, right? Where he does that weird dance, you know? Like when people talk about their
no,
favorite
I agree.
scenes
Yeah.
in Friday the 13th that aren't, Jason killing people, it's always the kind of like weirdish characters doing weirdish things. But let's get like example, when the guy and his girlfriend are going over just like information about the killer and they're talking about the victims, they show like pictures and all that,
Yeah.
of the victim, to make what is basically two people sitting down on a couch talking to make it more interesting. And they figure out of people they can interview, so they go to the antique store. Now, what stuck out to you about that antique store scene?
Um. Obviously, if I remember correctly, kind of like, if I remember correctly, because it's been a while, like the bird.
No, there was no bird in it, but there was a fat gay guy, like
Oh yeah,
yeah,
that gay guy. Oh
yeah.
fuck yeah, him.
Yeah, so
Oh, he was awesome.
he goes into the store and the manager is this, he's playing like a sassy gay guy kind of, like, and it's like a sort of silly comedic scene. Um and stuff. And it is just kind of I mean it's weird. Like it kind of reminds me of, did you ever see the Bye Bye Man?
No, and I don't ever plan on to.
Don't say it, don't think it. You got to be careful. Don't. I just said it. I could be in trouble. But in that movie, uh, the guy that they rent the house from or something, he works in a greenhouse and he is also a a kind of over the top gay guy. And it is just kind of funny that in these horror in this like horror film, there's this kind of like silly gay man in it, you know?
Oh, again, that is where, like, cause you said it to me, and I was thinking when we talked about like the comedy in Argento, I was kind of like, I don't remember that much comedy, but now with some of those scenes, I'm kind of like, yeah, I do remember now these scenes where there's these over the top personalities.
Yeah, I mean basically every person he interviews is like a silly scene, you know, like but in this scene he gets the painting, which I really like the painting cuz it's like this almost like it's slightly cartoony painting of this like nice hilly Italian village, but in the foreground there's a guy brutally murdering a woman.
Yeah, it's so just it is a very bizarre kind of like contrast, and maybe it's not like traditionally like syncs together. It kind of more like awkwardly like comes together,
Yeah.
and you're kind of like, you know, it adds more than it detracts.
Yeah. So he gets a copy of that painting, he puts it on his wall, and then of course, you know, it's a copy, so it's black and white. And then it transitions to the same painting but in color, and it pulls out and you see that it's in the killer's room, and I really like that.
Oh yeah, it's awesome. Again, almost everything about the like the visual choices with are just really like, especially for his first go, are very inspired for the time period.
Yeah. Another scene that's definitely inspired is when the killer kills that woman.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're
where
talking
it's
about like the scene with like the razor.
smoking.
Oh, that's where the smoking comes in.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a POV shot of like a woman smoking, and
Oh, and
she's
yeah,
laying in her
and she's in the
bed.
bed, and then it like transitions to like the bed door, the door of the bed to the bedroom. Oh, that
Yeah.
seems so
Yeah, this
freaky.
the music rap, you know, it starts to ramp up, and as she, you know, she turns, you know, she's looking at the doorway, but then she turns to put her cig out, she turns back, and music dead stop right in the middle of the doorway. The killer's there, all in black, and then he you know, he kills her, and it looks, I mean, it's great, right? It's a great visual kind of thing. It's a great sequence. I mean, a fantastic just display. You know, his
Yeah,
kills
like
are beautiful. Now, this one doesn't have anything super duper graphic, but as we get on, it's like they look as pretty as what we're describing, but they get a lot more like icky, you know, like they're also hard to watch. They're very well done, but they're also so hard to watch because I mean, they always
it's
go for
murder. See, that's the thing. That's the cruel like joke of it. It's like they're so beautiful to watch, and like like especially for people like us who love this sort of like technical like experimentation and know-how. It is exciting to watch, but then you're also going, "Oh yeah, a woman's being brutally murdered."
Yeah. And then, of course, after that murder, it cuts to like, you know, the guy having a happy breakfast with his girlfriend. There's kind of like a nice music and they're kind of flirting, and it shows like this contrast. And it's a similar contrast really to that painting, which is kind of a neat little thing they do. Like
Yeah,
showing it's like,
it's a lot of because we were saying it before. There's a contrast is just coming up over and over and over again. There's the comedy with the dark, the happy with the horrifying. It is just this constant duality.
yeah. And then we have that scene where the policeman he gives a speech on TV about the killer, and I really like this scene where you know you see a bunch of people crowded by a TV store watching the speech, and the camera kind of pans by, zooms in, uh, but then it zooms out and it goes to the phone booth, and then you realize it's like that wasn't actually just the camera panning in. that was actually a POV shot of the killer who then calls the police on the phone. So it's like a trick. You think you're looking at one thing, you're actually looking at another thing, and that's something Argento would do a lot more in Deep Red. And it's such a smart thing to do because it makes it so you can't really trust your eyes. He'll develop this way more in his other films, but the idea of you can't trust your eyes, you can't trust your ears is like, I mean, it really helps wrap the suspense for something like a horror film because you don't know whether or not this is just a normal camera pan, this is a normal camera zoom in, or is that actually the monster, the killer, watching you? You'll no
Yeah,
longer know
again,
when
it
you're safe.
creates it like through the visuals, through the angles, through the lighting, especially in that scene, because a lot of it is like dimly lit, so there's a lot of darkness. And so when you see that killer, once you see the outline, it becomes all the more like intense because it's simply you're in this like vulnerable state,
Yeah,
which is then when that killer, makes his move.
yeah, and there's another thing. There's just a scene where the guy is sitting down being like talked to by the police chief, and you know it's it's the basic conversation setup where it's shot reverse shot, so it's like shot of the guy talking and the camera's over the shoulder of the other guy, and then when the other guy starts talking it's the exact same image but from the other side. But it's like the most basic thing, everyone does it, right? It's the most simple thing.
Yeah.
It's like the default way that people film dialogue scenes pretty much. But something I noticed is this one's a bit different because the cutting is a bit faster. I don't know if you noticed that, but I did notice that,
Yeah,
like,
it's again, that's kind of where I get to that feel of like there's like a fiery passion because like everything is like very quick, everything's very efficient, everything is very or a lot of the scenes are very like expedient.
yeah, something
Like,
is done to make things go fast, but also make things visually interesting because taking this basic guy sits down, other guy sits down and also talks, but when you just add that little bit slightly kind of quicker cuts to it, not only does it make this you know exposition scene go faster, it makes it more exciting, it makes it more interesting, so you don't kind of care that like nothing important is really happening, it's just people saying stuff we kind of already know, because that's what you get in like procedural stuff, is there's always a lot of scenes where people go over information again that sometimes the audience might have already figured out by then. But okay, so anyway, then the guy gets to interview the pimp, who of course that scene is comedic. It's a silly scene. I was so when we were talking, I was so confused how you didn't think like his early films had like comedic bits to them, because I
because I
didn't.
more remembered the shock and the like the visceral than I do the funny.
Yeah, but even then, it's like Four Flies. The co-star of that movie is a comedy actor, so that's why I was kind of like confused because I only saw that one probably a year ago, so it's a little bit more fresher in my mind. But well, anyway, what happens is the killer, of course, is in a car, runs over the police officer that's watching over the guy, and then has a hired gun come out and basically chase him down with a silenced pistol. And the guy is wearing a bright yellow jacket. It's a cool visual image, and the soundtrack here, like the music goes like very hard here. It's very suspenseful seeing him run down these narrow streets in Italy being chased by this guy who has like kind of a visually striking look with the yellow.
Oh, again, yeah, again, the color choices and how they just and it's not just it looks pretty. It creates the character
It
of these
create it
situations
creates
where
tension.
because that is really kind of like the strength of that movie and the strength of pretty much all his movies because it's admittedly not like performances per se.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't think there's a single Argento film. Well, that's not true. But you never really, you're not really watching these films, and it's like, oh wow, what a great acting performance. I mean, most like in the '90s, half the films star his daughter, which um, but it's more what they're doing and just how all this stuff's kind of like framed. It's a lot more visual focus. It's not so much, oh, is this guy doing good acting, but like, does this guy look a part? Does this guy feel a feeling? And yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, I really like the one shot where it's just following the gun. You see, the guy's walking through this like car park holding a pistol. You only see the pistol as it just kind of like follows the movement. It's very also just smoothly shot.
It is.
And yeah, and I like that killer guy's body language. I like how he's chasing the guy, and then they turn a corner, and it's like there's a bunch of people, and the guy he immediately stops, takes his pistol, puts in his jacket pocket, casually like walks away, like very pro. He's a pro, and you get that idea with his body language. Gotcha. And then well, the killer, of course, later gets rid of the hitman because he's a loose end. He doesn't want to be tracked. And they're able to record some of the phone calls the killer leaves, and they hear a weird sound.
Oh yeah.
Gotcha. And then kind of like refresh my memory about kind of like the other stuff that happens.
Um. Okay, so they hear it, and then I believe what happens next is that they then go, or at least the guy goes to this one like kind of shack area
Oh yeah, talk to
where
the guy who made the painting.
yeah, I think I'm missing a few parts, but they start figuring out more about like the painting itself and what that could mean, and then it has this very morbid scene where he's actually eating cats.
Yes, it's revealed that the food that the artist is eating, because there's cats all over the place, it's revealed that he's at some of these cats he has cooked and eaten, and the main guy, he was this close to eating cat, and that made him immediately go, why the why the fuck am I here? I'm
Yeah,
sit I'm
that's what I love
sitting
about that
here next to
scene
this crazy
because
person
it's
following like some lead on this painting that might not have anything to do with anything.
yeah. Also, there's a scene, and I'm probably fucking up the order, but I remember when the killer starts to go after the main character's girlfriend, and how he's like trying to get at the door, which feels like very like you can see where, well, first you can see where the Hitchcock influence is, like no question. But then you also see in tandem where a lot of horror movies would go going forward, where they would use scenes like this. They would use tension like this, especially with the use of like I believe like lighting and just the way that the killer's trying to get into that room. It is very, very unsettling.
Yeah. Well, one detail that the painter says is that it's actually based off a real murder that he witnessed, I believe.
Yeah, and it's again this idea of like
Yeah.
art inspiring real life events, and then real life events,
Yeah.
kind of then coming about through art.
Yeah.
It's not the most like in-depth discussion about it, especially compared to his other movies, or
Yeah.
especially what he would do in the 90s.
Yeah.
Um but it is an idea that he would continue to kind of refine. But
Refine more.
here it's used as it's useful as a good
It's more of
kind of
like a
like way
plot
of
kind of thing.
explaining how these murders are happening.
Yeah. So they figure out that the sound is coming from a rare type of bird known as, the nickname for it is the bird with the crystal plumage. And they
The
know that,
title! We have the title drop!
Yeah, we do, baby. We got the title drop. That's... I love that. Oh.
and then it leads to this really great scene where you think we had the killer, which is that woman victim's husband.
Throughout the entire film, it's kind of implied that he's the killer, right? Because he fits the build. He's left-handed. And it just kind of makes sense because he's kind of creepy looking, and you're just like, oh yeah, of course, it's this guy. And they confront him and his wife having a fight, and he falls out the window.
Yeah, and there's this great POV shot. You see him like falling faster and faster and faster.
Yeah.
And he hits the pavement, and they do like a cut to the cast like running down to see him. And I think it's in that scene where he actually says that
he confesses to the murder. No, he confesses to the murders.
Oh, he confessed to the murders. Okay.
Yeah, you're stepping. But do you know how they did that? Do you know how they did that scene of the POV of him falling and hitting?
Did they? I feel like it's an answer of they literally dropped the camera out the window.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I was gonna be like, here's the trick they did to do that. They threw a camera out the window.
I mean, just inspiring.
I mean, honestly, it kind of is, because that's like, I mean, that's a crazy thing to do. Like, we're gonna toss our expensive camera out the window to get this shot. I mean, it's something that, like, because there's a really good falling shot in Batman Returns, where Selina Kyle gets pushed out that building.
But yeah, I love that shot. I love that.
But they didn't break a camera to do that. If Tim Burton was like, I want to do this, they'd be like, well, you crazy? That would break the camera. Do you know how expensive those things are? Hell no.
But here it's like, nope.
Yeah, throw that thing out the window. Who cares? How much did it cost? A lot of Italian dollars, a lot of spaghetti bucks. Who cares?
Lira at the time.
Yeah, who cares? But yeah, I mean, that's cool. I mean, Argento does stuff like that. We'll see it going on. He'll do a lot of stuff just to do it. There's plenty of times where it's like, I mean, this gets in, but he was the first guy in Italy to make a film using with CGI effects. I know some people, they're not big on CGI effects. They're like, but he, it's not like he used CGI blood or a CGI monster. Just, he wanted to experiment with computer effects. He wanted to do stuff with computer effects because no one else was doing it. We'll see that there's a lot of times he does stuff just because no one else is doing it, and that's what makes Argento that's what makes these movies cool, because a lot of times there is stuff that's done just because no one else does it. There's a risk taking to that a lot of people wouldn't do, because sometimes that stuff does sound crazy, like throwing a camera out a window, but I mean, it looks cool and it's daring,
He really, like, up until a certain point, he was really pushing the country's kind of like cinematic expression through these, genre like pictures that would probably be seen as lesser than.
Yeah, like he's doing a lot of crazy stuff. And that's what we always want. We always want people that are doing crazy stuff. And yeah, sometimes it doesn't work out, but sometimes it does. And when it does, it works out. And even when it doesn't, there's a niceness to the experimenting. Now, even though we're probably not the most biggest into, we look at stuff like the 15-minute exposition dump in Southland Tales, and we're like, no, thank you. But, no one's ever tried to do that. Maybe. Man, I don't. Maybe Argento shouldn't have directed that movie, so that scene would have not been 15 minutes of boredom. But let's see. Uh, so the guy, he confessed to all the murders, but guess what? It wasn't him. It was actually his
Dun, dun,
wife.
dun!
Bomb, bomb, bomb. And it turns out it turns out he's been trying to cover up her killings. So all the time that, someone was going after him, it wasn't the real killer that was going after the guy. It was the husband trying to cover up his wife's murders, trying to silence this guy and stuff. Which, that's pretty cool because, you think it's the guy, we typically think it's the male, male is usually the killer, female's usually the one that gets killed or the one that survives. So it's a
Yeah,
big
but it
switch
is
up.
in fact the woman who is doing these actions.
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting how like he was never in danger from the actual killer. Like, because the person stalking him wasn't the real killer, it was just her husband, which, really is like, oh, I thought I was seeing one thing. It turns out I'm seeing another thing, which is like an interesting thing to do. But, like in all these movies, the killer dies. How does the killer die again?
The killer dies by that I believe like there's a part because they go back to the museum where this all started, and she basically dies from like one of like the art pieces kind of like falling on her,
Yep.
which is again kind of this idea of art having this like kind of
Yeah.
violent
Yeah,
um
the art exhibit that was hanging falls on her and stabs her. But actually, I believe, yeah. But what's interesting is how the movie ends. It kind of
yeah,
ends
with the exposition about like why she would have done it in the first place.
which is very similar to the movie.
Psycho.
Yes, why did that? Yeah, it's kind of like a homage to the classic film Psycho.
Yeah, because it's basically like let's explain at the end why this character is acting the way the way they are acting. Although admittedly it is better done in Psycho.
Oh, come on. Well, that doesn't surprise me. But yeah, so like basically she saw the painting and she herself had been assaulted in a similar way, and it brought up that trauma, and it basically made her act out that kind of way, which, yeah.
Yeah, it's like unleashing this like
Yes.
dark side of her.
Yes, quite. Yeah, it's a look into the human psyche.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty. We now know what truly makes a killer.
Looking at art.
Yeah.
Don't be an art major, and
Oh,
not just because you won't get a job.
well, think about this, right? Who's one of the greatest villains of the like 20th century?
Um,
He had a mustache.
that's a lot. So, um,
He was German.
yeah, yeah.
And what did
Never
he
go to.
do before he killed a bunch of people?
He was into art and veganism. So
Exactly.
basically, do not be an art student vegan
Don't eat vegetables, don't make paintings, or you will turn into a serial killer. That's the lesson. Now, what's a piece of art?
or a fascist dictator, either or.
Yeah. What's a piece of art that you saw that made you be like, ah, geez, I sure would want to kill people?
Mm, probably anything involving YouTube.
Yeah, oh. I would have to say when I saw Star Wars Episode 9,
That would very much want me to murder some people as well, from what I heard. From what I've heard.
yeah, it really made me feel nothing. It made me really think about how my life is empty, how I'm incapable of feeling, and maybe I should go on a killing spree.
very much so.
But
Very much so.
you know what piece of art I do like?
What?
This movie.
It
Just
is art,
final
yes.
thoughts on this movie. Tell me if you liked it on a scale from 1 to 100. What would you rate it?
I would rate it a 9 out of 100, and 9 is very high.
That is pretty
But in all
high.
seriousness, I I think it is a great film in its genre. Isn't one of my like it's definitely up there. I wouldn't put it as one of Argento's like absolute best, but it is definitely in that conversation, and it is the film that kind of not kind of it did jumpstart this whole like wave of like giallo in the 70s, because it was in the 60s and it kind of died down, and then this film came out which then revitalized
Oh yeah,
it.
70s and 80s. I mean, I love Argento and I love this movie. I think like look, Quentin Tarantino puts a lot of Argento in his films, so
No question. Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. So like, there's something really worthwhile about his filmography. Um, I think the movie's fantastic. I love it. It's
Yeah.
like wow, imagine making a film. This is the first film you make. It's the first film you directed. You've written multiples, which that might be how you want to do it. Like, so then you understand like how a movie works, and after you write a couple, you got a good idea of what's the typical story structure. How do these scenes play out? When you're thinking that, I think you can then better kind of stage them, because we see a lot like where it's like these exposition typey scenes, like they're enhanced with something. It's like, okay, how do I make this interesting? And it really shows you how like creative of like a guy he is, because he's trying to make things always interesting. He's trying to make them always unique. There's a constant energy to anything. Taking something as simple as like a guy sitting down where it's like, okay, how can I make this interesting? Oh, what if
And he makes it interesting, which is what I think is important with directing. It's never so much what you're showing, it's how you're showing it is
yeah,
what is crucial.
yeah, I would definitely like example, I mentioned I think we both are not a fan of the Star Wars sequel films.
I've never watched them, never
Yeah.
plan on watching them.
Okay. Do you like the prequels?
Um, I like the idea of the prequels
You don't like
more
Jar
than
Jar? We should go wow wow.
but that's a
Like
case where
every, you know what I
with George Lucas, he had so many ideas he wanted to put down,
yeah.
and in many cases he didn't know how to like make them interesting to watch.
This is how I feel every time Anakin says, "I'll try spinning. That's a good trick."
It is art.
I'll
Yes.
try. Isn't it great how it's like, it's like pottery, it rhymes? What does pottery
It
also do?
does.
What does pottery also do?
It
Spins. And
uh
we know that's a good
it
trick.
what? Ah, yeah.
Pottery.
Yep.
It's like pottery. It spins, and that's a good trick. But, George
It
Lucas, there's a lot of scenes in the prequels of like people talking, and it's like there's some reverse shot, but like, it's within this super cool sci-fi world. It's like, yeah, sure, it's just two guys talking, but like there's like a spaceship outside.
yeah,
There's visual
or
stuff.
it's a weird alien creature
Yeah.
talking.
There's visual of course. I mean, you remember what is it, Dex Jester?
Yeah.
The best I had his action figure.
Oh lord. I don't know. I know I had I know I had toys from like the prequel trilogy
Yeah.
and
I
whatnot.
had I had that guy, and I had a Jedi guy who was like an alien, and his body basically looked like chopped beef.
Ah,
That was pretty cool, you know. I was always hungry when I looked at my Star Wars toys because I was thinking, man, what would it be like to eat at Dex Jester's Diner? It really sucks that Disney never tried to do that. Like, make it real. Dex Jester's Diner, 50s style diner.
Oh god.
Yeah, that's
That
like, oh
oh
wow.
god.
See,
So much
that's what I'm
shit in
talking
episode
about. You know,
2.
George Lucas is like, okay, we're gonna have an exposition scene. What if we had that scene in a space 1950s diner? And it's like that exactly. That's exactly what I would want. You know, what if there was what if R2D2 went bleep bloop? You know, and that's what I like about the prequels is that, you know, there's always some element of like trying to make the talky people scenes somewhat exciting, where, you know, all the space battles in the new Star Wars movies, I go like, I'm tired, I don't care, whatever. It's like I never thought that when I saw Jar Jar on screen.
Never. Never.
I
Oh god,
fucking love Jar
I'm
Jar
not thinking of
Binks.
his last scene in like episode, like the last time you ever see him, and it's like in episode 3.
Yeah, and he's like sad, which is real. It's kind of a character arc. You know, he went from being happy guy to sad guy. He's like, what's a go? Wow,
It's so
wow.
insane.
I'm sorry, but I love Jar Jar Binks.
I've never gotten annoyed with him either, even
Yeah, it's just
although I
like
can
I'm
like see
like
it.
20, like, oh, Gen Xers who were like 23 when they saw Phantom Menace, they're like, oh man, this isn't serious Star Wars like when I was a kid, and they had the gay robot and the robot and the trash can that went bleep bloop. That was for adults.
I mean, yeah,
What's more
totally.
mature than a giant dog man who went Garr?
So mature.
Yeah, so I love this movie. I love its
I do
visuals.
too.
I love its styling. Would you believe that it only gets better from here on out?
If well, I will pretend to say no.
Well, actually, you would be right because his next two films are not as good as this. But then after those two films, oh, he also made some drama film that no one ever really talks about because it's not a horror film. And it was also only released in Italy. But
Oh, it got though recently released. I think like last year on Blu-ray.
oh, great! And
Yeah,
now
for a
we'll
while.
talk. So tell you what, after not one two films, not two films, but after three films, his fourth film, that's when it gets even better, and it just goes up, then down, then up again, then up, then down, then up, then down, and then down, 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 uh, until we get to
Oh, how
Dracula
it goes
3D.
down. Oh, how it goes down.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. It is a wonderful filmography until it stops, and it stops somewhere around 2004.
Yeah, and it's a good run of shit.
Well, that is Argent. It all is Argento. I mean, the guy made some of the best horror films of the 70s and 80s, and he made some films that in the 90s that were slept on, I would say.
I would agree.
And that's the main reason we're doing this retrospective, because there is this, I would say, false narrative. I would say fake
Fake news,
news.
if you will.
Fake news. You know, the other day I watched a movie with Dolph Lundgren and Kelsey Grammer, and you know how like Kelsey Grammer, he's like a conservative guy.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, he plays a character, and he's like sitting in a chair. He's like, all these like MSNBC, CNN fake newsers, and I'm like, yes, yes, conservative action, man. Uh, Show these woke tards how to get shit done. Do it, Sideshow
Jesus.
Bob. I told you, right? I know a guy, right? I mean, he's like an old guy. Loves the show
Yeah.
Frasier. has never seen The Simpsons.
Good Lord.
Yeah, he doesn't even know what that is.
That is horrifying on several levels.
Crazy how you would go through your entire. How did you go through the entire 80s and 90s never hearing about The Simpsons?
Well, more in the 90s, how the fuck could you not know?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, my mom was. I was there, dude, and it sucked. Oh, man. Sometimes I wish Bart Simpson. They should have made an episode of The Simpsons where Bart Simpson kills Saddam Hussein.
That would be so classic.
Yeah, I've always wanted them to make it. You ever see you ever go to the mall and you see like those T-shirts where it's like cartoon characters, but like
Oh yeah, all the
they're
time, all
wearing
the
like
time.
hip hop clothes and they're like smoking backwoods or something, like it's like, oh, here's Bart Simpson, but he's like black and he's wearing Supreme. And I kind of wish they would make an actual show that's like those shirts.
Oh God, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, yeah. You ever see the one where it's like Crack kills and he gets squashed by a big butt lady? Like someone should someone should take those ideas and make an actual show. Make an actual animated
Oh.
show where the appeal is they smoke backwoods.
Jesus.
Yeah, it's a real shame there's not a scene in an Argento movie where they smoke backwoods and do other stuff that a black teenager would think is cool.
Absolutely.
It's a real shame. Well, that was our retrospective on The Bird with the Crystal Plumage. Join us sometime later where we cover his next film, The Cat of Nine Tails. Well, I'll see you later, Vic. Bye.
Bye.